This is about Charles Dickens on America. I have written about democracy in America, de Tocqueville's great study published in 1835 and 1840. Other Europeans, mostly Britons with a negative outlook, joined in. According to them, America might have achieved independence, but cultivation, manners, had eluded her. In 1842, the by then nearly legendary author Charles Dickens set sail for America. He was excited and inclined to be thrilled. Great expectations, you might say. When he left, he was massively disappointed and glad only to be leaving. Mary Shelley wrote, "Charles Dickens has just come back home in a state of violent dislike of the Americans and means to devour them in his next work." That next work, American Notes, did chew us up a bit, but I do not think that Dickens was actively hostile, except when it came to the press, and that for him was a case of self-defense. For the rest, I find he writes with a tone of astonishment, whether he was regarding Niagara Falls, the condition of country roads, the Mississippi River — he thought Twain's Jewel was the beastliest river in the world — or the social set in St. Louis. Things were fine and dandy in Boston, where he landed. The city offered to change its name to Boztown, and he was praised and feted, and if it was all too effusive and more than a little silly, it was also sincere on both sides, Dickens and the public. Both were rather enchanted. That spell wore off in New York. In one speech, Dickens proposed an international copyright law to stop thieves from pirating his work and profiting from it, while he earned nothing. Many newspapers, some of which had done exactly that, vilified him for this, mocked him, and sent their cartoonists to work on him. This enraged Dickens and turned him against the press in general, calling it a cancer on an otherwise great nation. As our current president has learned, it's rough going up against the media. Dickens did not miss an opportunity to express his disgust. The press was mean, paltry, silly, and disgraceful. It was pitiful, malicious, creeping, crawling, and sneaky. It was driveling, slanderous, wicked, and monstrous. The newspapers gleefully fired back. This was a pitched battle that went on for 16 years. As the rigors of travel, in cramped packet boats, on jarring roads and frightening rivers, took their toll, as well as the crush of attention whenever he and his wife stopped to rest, Dickens began to sour on America. He became exhausted and easily put out. The housing was utterly forlorn and miserable in appearance, with broken windows and rotting tree stumps. Accommodations were shabby, and he was especially alarmed by the constant presence of spittoons, even in the White House. Horrible! Poor aim, too. He was appalled by some prisons, an insane asylum, pigs running in the streets, and a long string of vulgar, petty vanities common seemingly to every American outside of Boston. He did encounter a few wholesome people, but the mass of them are miserably dependent in great things and miserably independent in small things. The nation, he wrote, is a body without a head. The national character, which boastful Americans took to be grounded in independence and free opinion, was in fact driven by jealousy and distrust, which infected everything and explained the ruinous nature of every governing body, from the smallest town to the nation's capital. By the time he reached St. Louis, Dickens had had it. Nowhere on earth can you find so many intensified bores as in the United States, he wrote. No man can form an adequate idea of the real meaning of the word boredom without coming here. The people are pretty rough, intolerably conceited, degraded and broken down, morose, sullen, clownish, and repulsive. They are heavy, dull, and ignorant, with absolutely no sense of humor. And the worst of it was slavery. Dickens was astounded by what he called that accursed and detested system. He spoke with a citizen in Richmond who defended it. "It is clearly in our interest to take good care of our slaves," the man said. And when Dickens pressed him on it, he replied, "The niggers must be kept down, and the whites have put down the colored people wherever they have found them." No boast in that, just the shocking truth. Unlike de Tocqueville, Dickens was not hopeful about America. Look at the exhausted treasury, the paralyzed government, the unworthy representatives, he wrote. Note the ultimate failure of its example, a death blow to liberty. And yet, years later, seeing that he could make money with readings of his work, great sums of money, he returned, and in his first speeches was careful to praise America, including the press, knowing it would be, for him, a land of opportunity and wealth. Time might not heal all wounds, but money sure does.